7 seasons, 7 different champions. That's the 2020s in the NBA, and it's never happened before. Every single year, a brand new team got to call themselves the best in basketball. We had no back-to-back winners and no dynasty. And you know, saying that out loud got me thinking, if no team could hold on to the throne for more than a year, which one of these champions actually deserved to be called the best of the bunch? Because here's the thing about being a champion. Not all championships are created equal. Some teams steamrolled through everybody in their path. Some teams clawed their way through wars that lasted 7 brutal games. Some teams were beloved across the entire league. And some teams had fans everywhere around the world actively rooting for them to lose. We are going to be ranking the NBA champions of the 2020s, from the 2026 Knicks all the way back to the 2020 Lakers. But don't worry, I'm not doing this off the top of my head. I built 5 categories and every team gets judged against all 5. Story, because some of these teams had to take years of heartbreak before they ever got to feel this moment. Dominance, because we need to know how truly great they were, from the regular season grind all the way through every round of the playoffs. Entertainment, because some of these teams were must-watch basketball and some of them were just good enough to win. Likability, because winning doesn't always mean the world loved you for it. And finally, strength of opponents, because beating a team that's falling apart hits much different than beating a team at full strength. Every category gets scored 1 through 10, and once we've gone through all 7 teams, we're adding up every single score to crown the best champion of this decade. We've got heartbreak, we've got redemption, we've got villains nobody could stand, and underdogs nobody saw coming. By the end of this video, one team is walking away with the title of the best champion of the decade so far. And I promise y'all, the answer might not be who you think it is. Let's start where it all just happened. The 2026 New York Knicks. Mike Brown took over this team in his first year as head coach, stepping in for Tom Thibodeau. And the questions were everywhere. How could you fire a coach that just took you to the conference finals for the first time in over 2 decades? Could a new voice in that locker room actually get this team over the hump? New York had been knocking on the door for years. A trip to the second round here, a trip to the conference finals there. Always good enough to make noise, but never great enough to finish the job. We have Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart. This was the roster that finally had to answer the question New York had been asking since 1973. Are we actually built for this? They went 53-29 in the regular season. Good for 3rd seed in the East. Not the flashiest record in the conference, but nobody who watched this team all year was surprised by what came next. Now let's talk about how they actually got here, because this is where the Knicks separate themselves from almost every team we're going to cover today. You have to go back to 1973 to find the last time this franchise won at all. And for a market the size of New York, that's kind of insane. You had Willis Reed and Walt Frazier. That's how far back you have to reach. And in between then and now, this was one of the most miserable stretches any franchise in basketball has ever had to live through. From 2002 to 2022, the Knicks had the worst regular season winning percentage in the entire NBA. The worst playoff winning percentage too. 14 different head coaches over 21 years. 8 total playoff wins in 2 full decades. If you were a Knicks fan during those years, you know it was much worse than just losing. It felt like you were watching a franchise that seemingly had no idea how to win. Then Jalen Brunson signed in the summer of 2022, and almost overnight, the whole identity of this team changed. They made the playoffs every single year after that. They got bounced in the second round in 2023. They got bounced in the conference finals in 2025, losing to Indiana in a historic, heartbreaking fashion.
He'll take it. He'll backpedal, a 3 for the win, and oh! He got it!
And then this year, after over 5 decades of waiting, they finally broke through. Jalen Brunson, the son of a former NBA player, Rick Brunson, the guy picked 33rd overall in his draft, the guy doubted by almost half the league, he became the engine that ended the longest active championship drought in basketball. 53 years of nothing, and then everything. I'm gonna give their story a 9 out of 10.
Knicks fans, this is not a dream. Your long wait has ended. Go ahead and cry. After 53 years, the Knicks are finally NBA champions once again.
All right, before we continue, I gotta talk about something that's been absolutely saving my life through this NBA offseason. This video is sponsored by Cook Unity. If you don't know Cook Unity, it's basically chef-to-you meal delivery. You're not getting some mass-produced meal kit. You're getting food from actual award-winning chefs. We're talking about Food Network names, Michelin-level cooking. They have over 130 chefs on their platform. And every week, you've got access to 400+ meals covering like 45 different cuisines and diets. Here's why I actually actually use it. First and foremost, their food is actually like really good. Before I was even sponsored by them, I was ordering Cook Unity already. When I'm deep into editing or writing a script like this one, I don't have time to cook, and I'm not trying to eat garbage takeout every other night. So I ordered a lot of meals, and the fettuccine bolognese made by Maya Bengochia was so good. It tasted like something that you get at a restaurant. Fresh, fully prepped, and ready in under 2 minutes. I also tried the barbecue chicken with mac and cheese. Oh my Lord, it's so good. All of it was packed with so much flavor. You pick your meals right from the app, then they show up right at your door. And again, they're never frozen. You just heat them up and eat. So if you want good food without the grocery run or the cleanup, go to the link in the description right now and try Cook Unity. Use my code JZUncut50 to get 50% off your first order. Seriously, click that link down below. Use code JZUncut50 to save 50% off your first order. You will regret it if you don't take advantage of this deal. Thanks again to Cook Unity for sponsoring today's video. Here's where the Knicks turn from a feel-good story into something that actually demands respect. 53-29 in the regular season doesn't jump off the page. Third seed in the East. But the moment the playoffs started, this team became a completely different animal. They went 16-3 across the entire postseason. That's a winning percentage most champions in NBA history can't even come close to touching. And believe me, it wasn't just that they won, it's how they won. New York set a new record for the largest point differential in a single postseason, which was 15 points a game. That number broke a mark that had stood since the Milwaukee Bucks back in 1971. Let's start with round one of the playoffs. They went down 2-1 against Atlanta before ripping off 3 straight wins to close it out.
Let's get the rebound and McBride. Robinson!
Round two, they swept Philadelphia. In the conference finals, they swept Cleveland. And then in the finals against San Antonio, they closed it out in 5 games against the Spurs team that had just gone through the gauntlet of the West. But the number that really tells the story here is 13. That's how many playoff wins in a row the Knicks put together at one point during this postseason. 13 wins straight. I mean, what? The only team in NBA history with a longer streak is the 2017 Golden State Warriors. But that's for a future video if y'all smash that like button on this one for me. This was far from a team that just found a way. This was a team that once the lights came on in April, looked like one of the most dominant playoff teams we've seen in years. I'm gonna rank their dominance a 9 out of 10. Now let's talk about why this team was must-watch basketball. Because these Knicks gave people a reason to tune in every single night of this playoff run. It starts with Jalen Brunson. By the time this postseason rolled around, the league had already given him a nickname that fans everywhere had latched onto: Captain Clutch.
Brunson, three-pointer, puts it in! Captain Clutch has come alive!
He averaged almost 10 points a game in the fourth quarter alone through these playoffs, the highest mark of anybody in the league. In the finals, he accounted for over 40% of New York's fourth quarter scoring. That's the kind of number you don't see since Dirk Nowitzki was doing it back in 2011. But the real reason this team became appointment viewing was how they kept finding ways to claw back into games that looked completely dead. This team trailed by double digits in every single finals game, and they still won 4 out of 5 games. Across the whole postseason, they went 6-2 in games they trailed by 10 or more points. That's the best mark anybody's tracked in 30 years. And then, of course, there's game 4 of the NBA Finals. They were down 29 points.
29.
I am completely stunned. The Knicks don't seem to be playing with the energy they have to play to win an NBA championship.
And then they completed the largest comeback in finals history. Y'all remember how that game ended, right?
Gets it, fires up a 3. Shot no good. The chip, it's gone! It's gone! It's gone! With 1.2 remaining, Knicks take the lead. OG Anunoby, and it's 107-106.
If you watched that game live, you know exactly what it felt like the moment that buzzer sounded. This was a team that made you believe that no matter how bad it looked, they were never fully out. I'm gonna give their entertainment score an 8 out of 10. Now here's where this gets a little bit complicated, because the Knicks weren't universally loved this run. In fact, they were far from it. Going into the finals, a lot of neutral fans were actually rooting for San Antonio. Wembanyama was the league's most exciting young talent. The Spurs hadn't won since the Tim Duncan era, and there was a real appetite to see how that story played out. But as the series went on, the tide started to shift. Wembanyama picked up real heat for how physical and reckless some of his plays were getting. He'd already been ejected earlier in the playoffs for elbowing Naz Reid, then another flagrant in the finals against Karl-Anthony Towns, and then another flagrant he should have been called for when he stepped under Brunson while he was taking a 3. The conversation started shifting away from how talented he is to whether he has the maturity to actually win it all yet. So by the time the Knicks won, some of that neutral support had quietly shifted in their direction. But here's the other side of all of this, and it's the side that actually knocks the Knicks down a peg. The way some of these fans behaved through this run was flat out embarrassing. Police cars smashed, school buses set on fire. There were multiple instances of people getting jumped in the streets simply for wearing a Spurs jersey, surrounded, beaten, their jerseys literally torn off their backs. The city's own mayor had to come out and publicly condemn this. Now, as a normal NBA fan, I don't enjoy watching any of that. A basketball game does not justify destroying your own city or putting hands on someone just because of the colors they're wearing. And the unfortunate truth is, a lot of people who saw that footage walked away thinking that New York doesn't deserve this, regardless of what the team itself did on the court. So this category is a mixed bag for the Knicks. They had real positive momentum nationally by the time they won it. But what happened in those streets is impossible to ignore. And unfortunately for the champs, as likable as they were on the court, some fans made it unbearable to cheer for. I'm gonna give their likability a 5 out of 10.
Talk about the difference Coach Brown made and how he brought you all together.
Now let's break down exactly who the Knicks had to go through to get the job done, because not every road to a championship looks the same. Round 1, Atlanta. This Hawks team wasn't your typical 6 seed. They traded away their franchise cornerstone Trae Young at the deadline for CJ McCollum, and that move paid off fast. McCollum became their best player down the stretch, going for 32 points in a Game 2 win over New York. Add in a breakout all-star year from Jalen Johnson and a most improved season from gilgeous-alexander Walker, and this team actually jumped out to a 2-1 lead on the eventual champs. But New York closed the door, winning the next 3 games, including a 51-point blowout to end it. Round 2, Philadelphia. The Sixers had just upset the number 2 seed Boston Celtics in 7 games. They had real momentum, but we all know how the story goes with Joel Embiid. He's never fully healthy when it matters most. And by the time Philadelphia got to New York, after coming back from a 3-1 deficit against the Celtics, there just wasn't much left in the tank. The Knicks swept them in 4 straight games. Conference Finals, Cleveland. This roster had real talent. Donovan Mitchell, who battled ankle and groin injuries throughout the year and still managed to be one of the East's best scorers. Evan Mobley, a guy who's been the subject of non-stop conversation around the league about what his actual role should be on this team. And James Harden, who like clockwork tends to shrink the moment the lights get brightest in the playoffs. This series started with a gut punch for Cleveland. They led by 22 points in the 4th quarter of Game 1 and somehow blew the whole thing in overtime. The series never recovered from there. New York swept them in 4 straight games. And then the finals in San Antonio. Here's where things get genuinely interesting, because on paper, this should have been the toughest team the Knicks faced all postseason. The Spurs had just gone through a 7-game war with the injured defending champion Thunder to even get here. But this San Antonio roster was historically young, the 2nd youngest team to ever reach the NBA Finals, trailing only the 1977 Trailblazers. The only reason this series felt close at any point is because Victor Wembanyama is simply a generational talent. Even on nights when his numbers weren't jumping off of the stat sheet, take him off that roster, and this isn't even a series. But here's something everybody overlooked when they counted New York out heading into this matchup. Playoff basketball isn't always about who's better on paper. It's about who matches up best. And the Knicks had exactly the right pieces sitting on their bench for a problem like Wemby. Karl-Anthony Towns and Mitchell Robinson gave New York size, length, and physicality that most teams simply don't have lying around. You don't need to be the better team overall to win a series. Sometimes you just need to be the right matchup at the right time. So here's the honest breakdown. The East path wasn't loaded this year, and a couple of these wins came against teams that were more banged up than they looked. The finals themselves were really a battle of New York's experience against San Antonio's talent. And as we all know, talent alone was never going to be enough against a team this complete. This was a pretty easy run to a title, but that doesn't take away from what the Knicks accomplished. Winning a championship, any championship, after 53 years of nothing is still one heck of an achievement. I'm going to give the strength of their opponents a 5 out of 10. And there we have the 2026 New York Knicks, totaling at 36 out of 50.
Who let the dogs out?
Now, forget all of that for a second, because we're going back to 2025, and this Thunder team brought something completely different to the table. Before we get into what makes this Thunder team so interesting, you gotta understand just how dominant they were heading into this run. Oklahoma City went 68-14 in the regular season, the number 1 seed in the West. And this wasn't just a good team padding their record against bad competition. This was the youngest team to ever win more than 60 games in a regular season in NBA history, and only the 7th team to ever hit 68 wins. They posted the 2nd best net rating the league has ever seen. They entered the playoffs with the best scoring differential in NBA history, nearly 13 points a game. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was the engine. He was smooth, he was relentless, he was impossible to keep out of the paint.
Put the ball in the hands of SGA. More speed. SGA right down the lane off the trampoline.
Around him was a young, hungry core built almost entirely through the draft, with names like Chet Holmgren, J-Dub, Lou Dort, and Alex Caruso, who they later acquired, anchoring one of the most disruptive defensive basketball has seen in years. This was a team that had been building towards this moment for years. And in 2025, all of it finally came together. Now let's talk about how OKC actually got here, because this is a real drought, even if it doesn't get talked about the way some others do. This franchise hadn't won a championship since 1979, back when they were the Seattle Supersonics. That's 46 years of nothing. And it's not like Oklahoma City had never come close. Back in 2012, this same franchise made the finals with a young core of Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Russell Westbrook, a trio so loaded that everybody assumed that they'd be back, probably more than once.
Here is Durant for the win. Kevin Durant has won it at the buzzer.
They ended up losing in that finals, and then the whole thing fell apart. Harden got traded. Durant eventually left for Golden State. Westbrook stuck around and then got moved too. And Oklahoma City didn't sniff the finals again for 13 years. What rebuilt this team from scratch was patience. General manager Sam Presti spent years stockpiling draft picks, taking what looked like lost seasons just to set up for the future that nobody outside the building could really see yet. Gilgeous-Alexander came over in the Paul George trade back in 2019, at a time when most people viewed it as Oklahoma waving the white flag on competing anytime soon. And for a while, that's exactly what it looked like. This team missed the playoffs entirely just a couple years before all of this. They didn't have any flashy free agent signings. No superstar trade demands forcing their way into the league's biggest market. Just a quiet, methodical rebuild through the draft, year after year, while most of the basketball world wasn't paying any attention to them at all. And then it all clicked. Shea turned into one of the most unguardable scorers in the league. The defense around him became suffocating. And by the time the 2025 playoffs rolled around, Oklahoma City was far from being just a good team. They might have been one of the best basketball teams we've seen in decades. It was 46 years since the Sonics last won it all. 13 years since that Durant, Harden, Westbrook core fell just short. And finally, with a completely different group built from the ground up, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander brought a championship to Oklahoma City. I'm going to give their story a 7 out of 10. If the Knicks were a team that just turned it on for the playoffs, Oklahoma City was a team that never turned it off all season long. At least that's the story the regular season told. Like I said, they went 68-14, the #1 seed in the West, and not even close. Second best net rating the league has ever recorded. On paper, this looked like a team that was about to steamroll the entire postseason without much resistance. That's not exactly what happened though. They opened up by sweeping Memphis. No issues there. But after that, things got a lot harder than anybody ever expected. Denver pushed them to a full 7 games in the second round, a series most analysts figured Oklahoma City would handle without much trouble at all. Then in the finals, they faced Indiana, a team that wasn't supposed to hang with them at all. And well, they got dragged all the way to a Game 7 as well. And that Game 7 is exactly where this gets complicated. Tyrese Halliburton went down with a torn Achilles in the first quarter, and Indiana lost their best player in the biggest game of their entire franchise. There's a real argument out there that says Oklahoma City doesn't finish this off if Hallie stays healthy, that the Pacers had been the better team in that moment, and a freak injury is the only reason that this title exists at all. So the final playoff record sits at 16-7. Still a winning percentage most teams would kill for, and they did close both of those 7-game series with blowouts, including a 125-93 win over Denver in their Game 7. But their path wasn't the steamroller the regular season hinted at, and there's a fair conversation to be had about how much of this title came down to one bad break for somebody else. I'm gonna give their dominance a score of 6 out of 10. Now here's where this Thunder team really separates itself from a lot of champions we're going to talk about today, because this wasn't a team built around one guy doing everything. This was a defensive machine that made you want to watch just to see how suffocating they could be. Oklahoma City had the best defense in the league by a wide margin, both in the regular season and in the playoffs. Lou Dort, Alex Caruso, Cason Wallace, Chet Holmgren, a swarm of length and speed that turned every possession into a problem for the other team. And unfortunately for all of their opponents, most teams just couldn't hold on to the ball. And then there's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's not really a flashy highlight reel kind of superstar. He's sort of a guy who just methodically gets to his spots, draws fouls, and putting up 30 a night in the finals without ever looking like he was forcing anything. We all know how smooth he is. It's almost unfair to guard. Now, I'll be honest here. As a Pistons fan, defense is something I personally love watching. So my rating here might lean a little higher than somebody who just wants to watch highlight plays and chaos every possession. But I will say this because it impacts the score a lot. A lot of people around the league have agreed that this Thunder defense gets away with a level of physicality that other teams just don't. And we're going to dig into that a little more in a later segment. I'm going to give their entertainment a 6 out of 10. Now, this is a complicated one because there's two completely different stories happening at the same time with this team. People generally love a young, upcoming team finding its way to the top. And OKC fits that mold perfectly. A small market, a homegrown roster, a true underdog story on paper. But outside of OKC, the goodwill basically evaporated. And it comes down to one specific thing: the officiating. I'm sorry, it's got to be talked about here. Remember, this is purely unbiased. My Pistons haven't won a chip. There is a real ongoing belief around the league that this team, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander specifically, gets away with a level of contact and foul calls that other teams just don't. Fans have chanted flopper at him during playoff games.
The least that they could do is get the same respect that everybody else in this league gets and get refereed the same way that everybody else in this league gets reffed. And enough is enough of it. And what you saw tonight was disgusting.
Social media erupts nearly every series with clips of him getting to the line on plays a lot of people don't think are real fouls. The label foul baiter has basically attached itself to his name at this point, whether he likes it or not. And here's what bothers me about that label specifically. Shai isn't some gimmick player living off of cheap whistles. This is a guy who has won 2 MVPs and a championship already, putting up numbers that put him in conversations with Michael Jordan statistically. He's already building a case to be one of the best point guards to ever play this game. Reducing all of that down to he just foul baits genuinely undersells how good he actually is. But unfortunately, facts don't always change feelings. If you're a fan watching your team get out-muscled and out-whistled by Oklahoma City, it gets frustrating. And that exact frustration has turned into a real dislike across a huge chunk of the league's fan base. The general consensus outside of Oklahoma City is that people just don't like this team, and the officiating conversation is the biggest reason why. So because of all of that, I'm going to give their likability a 4 out of 10. Now let's break down exactly who the Thunder had to go through to get the job done, because their path is really weird. Round 1, Memphis. On paper, this looks like a real series, but Memphis was a mess heading in. Ja Morant, their best player and the engine of everything they did, was banged up and dealing with the kind of injury issues that have followed him basically his whole career. The Grizzlies simply just didn't have enough. OKC swept them in 4, outscoring them by 78 points combined across the entire series. Round 2 is Denver. This is where things got real. Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets, still just 2 years removed of their championship core, pushed the Thunder all the way to 7 games. A series most people expected OKC to handle far easier than they actually did. Aaron Gordon, who'd been the story of Denver's entire playoff run with multiple buzzer-beating heroics, had to sit out in Game 7 with a hamstring injury. And even without him, Denver still made OKC sweat before eventually losing 125-93 in the final game. Conference Finals was Minnesota. Anthony Edwards was the engine here, a young superstar who already led the Wolves to back-to-back Conference Finals appearances. But OKC's defense completely smothered him, sending multiple bodies at him on every touch. And Edwards himself admitted afterwards that the experience forced him to rework parts of his offensive game. Minnesota fell in 5. And then the finals, Indiana. Nobody expected the series to go the distance, but the Pacers dragged Oklahoma City to a full 7 games behind a resilient roster that just refused to go away.
Halliburton looking. Halliburton driving, pulls off, jump shot. It's good! It's good! With 0.3 of a second remaining.
Before that title ultimately got decided by Halliburton's Achilles injury in the first quarter of Game 7. Who knows who would have won that? So here's the breakdown. Memphis and Minnesota were the easy ones. OKC handled both of them without much resistance. Denver and Indiana were the wars. 2 separate Game 7s against teams that weren't supposed to take them that far. It's a path that split right down the middle. Half cakewalk, but half real fight to survive. I'm going to give the strength of their opponents a 6 out of 10. And there we have the 2025 Oklahoma City Thunder, totaling at 29 out of 50. Now wipe the slate clean, because we're heading to Boston next, and the Beantown Boys ran the league a completely different way. This team came into the 2024 season with one thing on their mind: unfinished business. The Celtics had been right there before. A finals loss to Golden State in 2022. Then in 2023, they fell into an 0-3 hole against Miami in the conference finals, clawed all the way back to force a Game 7, and eventually came up short. By the time the 2024 season rolled around, Boston wasn't interested in moral victories anymore. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown anchored the roster, but this team was deeper and more complete than anything Boston had put together in years. Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis arrived in the offseason, giving this group two-way size and championship pedigree at every position. Derek White and Al Horford rounded things out, giving head coach Joe Mazzulla a roster with almost no weaknesses anywhere on the floor. They went 64-18 in the regular season, the best record in basketball by a wide margin. And from the very first game of the year, this team made it pretty clear that they weren't here to almost win anymore.
Always got to rain on the parade. Look at JB. He dropped Doncic.
Now, this isn't a drought story in the way some of these other teams have had. Boston's championship history is honestly absurd. 18 titles, the most of any franchise in NBA history. But even a franchise this decorated has had its long stretches of nothing. And it's worth putting into perspective just how far this team had fallen at different points before getting back here. Go back to 1986. Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish. That legendary Celtics core wins it all. And then the franchise goes quiet for 22 years. No titles through the entire 90s. Nothing in the early 2000s. Just a once great dynasty fading into irrelevance. It wasn't until 2008 that Boston finally got back on top. Then it happened again. Another long gap. The Celtics spent years of being good, but not good enough. So by the time 2024 arrived, this wasn't really an underdog story or a multi-decade curse like some of the other teams that we'll cover. This was a historically great franchise that kept finding ways to fall just short, finally putting it all together and reminding the league why they've always been the gold standard of this sport. I'm gonna give their story a 6 out of 10. Boston's whole blueprint this season was basically a copy and paste job, and they'd be the first to admit this. Take the formula the Warriors used to dominate the league for a decade. Spam threes from everywhere on the floor, move the ball constantly, and lock in defensively. And of course, run this with even more size and shooting than Golden State ever had. 64-18 in the regular season, the best record in the league. They had the best offensive rating in basketball at that time, and a defense that could match it. And then in the playoffs, they were even better, going 16-3, one of the best playoff records of any team we're covering today. But here's something worth pointing out. Kristaps Porzingis, one of their most important two-way pieces, missed the first 10 games of these playoffs entirely with a calf strain. And guess what? They didn't blink. Boston kept on rolling without him. Then once he actually got to the finals, in game 2, he tore something else in his leg, missed game 3 completely, and was barely able to play in game 4. This team won a championship with one of their key starters unavailable for a massive chunk of this run. And then there's how they actually closed out the finals. Dallas had Luka Doncic, an absolute offensive force, but a poor defender, and Boston knew it. So their game plan was just to hunt him relentlessly. Every single possession, they ran their offense directly at Luka, forcing him to guard switch after switch, exposing him over and over on national television. It wasn't subtle. It was a calculated, ruthless game plan, and it worked perfectly. Dallas simply had no answer for a team that attacked their best player's biggest weakness every single time down the floor. I'm going to give their dominance a 9 out of 10. There's a real joy in watching Tatum and Brown figure out how to share the spotlight. For years, people wondered if two ball-dominant wings could really coexist on the same team. By 2024, they'd finally answered that question. Watching them take turns carrying the offense, feeding off of each other in big moments, and trust the system around them instead of fighting for shots. That part of this team was a blast to watch. But let's be honest about the other side of this. Boston led the league in three-point attempts that season, averaging over 42 a night, the most in basketball.
Make the right play versus the 2-on-1. That's that simple. Could be a 3, could be a layup. Find a 2-on-1, do it. I've answered that for 2 years now.
And that number only climbed in the years after. For a lot of NBA fans who grew up on highlight reels and one-on-one ISO buckets, watching a team jack up shot after shot from beyond the line, possession after possession, it got repetitive fast. And a lot of people around the league found this team flat out boring to watch. More math experiment than basketball artistry. So this one's a real split. If you love efficient, modern spacing heavy basketball, this team was a treat. If you wanted highlight plays and drives to the bucket, you were probably changing the channel. I'm going to give their entertainment a 6 out of 10.
Trash finals. To sit there and shoot 15, 16 threes in a row when you can just drive to the basket, no one can stop you.
This is a team that's tough to root for if you're not already a Celtics fan. A lot of it doesn't have much to do with basketball at all. Let's start with Tatum. There's a whole corner of the internet that's decided he's corny. Some of it traces back to touching moments, like when he revealed that he texted the late Kobe Bryant, "I got you today," before a huge Game 7 a couple years back. A tribute to his idol that a lot of people found moving, but most people found, well, lame. And then the other moments, like copying old championship celebrations from guys like Kevin Garnett. I mean, this still gets dragged to this day. We did it! And look, I get why some of it lands that way, but honestly, I find a lot of this criticism unfair. This is one of the best two-way players in the league, somebody who's quietly putting together a Hall of Fame case. And at this point in his career, I think he's underrated relative to how good he actually is. He also seems like a good guy off the court, a present father and husband who's never been in any real controversy. People just decided that he's not that guy, and once that label sticks, it's hard to shake. And then there's Brown. After the finals, the media panel actually gave him the finals MVP over Tatum, even though Tatum outproduced him in points, rebounds, and assists for the series. A lot of fans felt like Tatum got robbed, and some of that frustration unfairly gets pointed at Brown, like he somehow took something that wasn't his. The two of them have always denied any tension, but the public narrative around it never fully went away. And then, of course, there's the actual style of play. We already touched on this in entertainment, but it bleeds right into likability too. A lot of fans don't just find the constant three-point chucking boring. They actually resent it, blaming Boston for what they see as the death of mid-range basketball and turning the sport into a math equation instead of an art form. And of course, their head coach, Joe Mazzulla. This guy gives you some of the strangest press conferences in the entire league. At one point, he literally answered every single question in a post-game interview with the exact same two-word phrase just to make a point about a referee call.
Illegal screen. Illegal screen.
Some people find that stuff hilarious, and a lot of people find it weird. It sort of adds to the idea that the whole organization just rubs people the wrong way. So let's just quickly put all of this together. You got a corny captain, a co-star some fans resent for the wrong reasons, a brand of basketball a large portion of the league can't stand, and a coach who treats the podium like a bit. Add all of that together and you get a team that's hard to embrace if you're not already wearing that jersey. I'm gonna give their likability a 6 out of 10.
Illegal screen.
Now, this is where things get really controversial because a lot of people around the league refer to this title as the injury ring. And once you look at the path, it's hard not to see why. Round 1, Miami. This looks like a rematch of the brutal 7-game war these two teams had just fought a year earlier. But Jimmy Butler, Miami's best player and the heartbeat of everything they do in the playoffs, suffered an MCL sprain right before the series and missed all 5 games. Without him, this wasn't the same Heat team at all. Boston handled them in 5. Round 2, Cleveland. Jared Allen had already been out since the first round with a rib injury and missed this entire series too. Then Donovan Mitchell, who was Cleveland's best player, he went down with a calf strain and missed games 4 and 5. And of course, a banged up Cleveland team had no real chance. Boston won in 5. Conference Finals, Indiana. This is the one that really cemented the nickname. Tyrese Halliburton re-injured his hamstring midway through game 2 and missed the rest of the series entirely. So Boston swept them in 4. And then the finals against Dallas. The Mavericks had Luka Doncic, but he was managing knee and ankle issues throughout these playoffs. And Boston still finished 14 games better than them in the regular season. Boston won in 5. So let's break this down. Every single series Boston played in the East featured a star opponent who wasn't at full strength. Butler, Allen, Mitchell, and then Halliburton. That's not a coincidence at 3 straight rounds. That's a real pattern. And that's exactly why some people will always put an asterisk next to this title. Boston was the best team in the league regardless, but they also never had to prove it against a fully healthy opponent the entire way through. I'm going to give the strength of their opponents a 4 out of 10. And there we have the 2024 Boston Celtics, totaling at 31 out of 50.
I think that we did it together, and I feel like I feel like the world saw that. We did it as a team, no individual player, everybody locked arms, and we got the job done.
Up next, we're headed to Denver, and the Nuggets ran the league through a completely different blueprint. Now we get to a team that did something most champions never get to say. They won their first ever title in franchise history. Denver had been building towards this moment for years, and the whole thing centered around one guy who doesn't look anything like a typical superstar. Nikola Jokic, a do-everything center who passes like a point guard and scores like the best big man of his generation. Around him, Jamal Murray made a career out of delivering in the biggest moments, and a steady supporting cast of Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. They went 53-29 in the regular season. Good enough for the top seed in the West for the first time in franchise history. And from the jump, this team looked different. They weren't built around isolation scoring or spamming threes, just suffocating two-man chemistry between Jokic and Murray that the rest of the league simply didn't have an answer for. This was far from a team chasing a dynasty or trying to validate a super team. This was a franchise that never even sniffed a championship, trying to finally break through. This is one of the purest stories we're going to cover because there's no shortcut here. No super team, no big splashy trade, just a franchise built patiently over years, finally getting to the top, and it's anchored by one of the most unlikely superstars the league had ever produced. Nikola Jokic wasn't even drafted in the first round back in 2014. He went 41st overall, picked so late and so quietly that ESPN was airing a Taco Bell commercial at the exact moment his name got called. He wasn't even in attendance. He was asleep back home in Serbia, and his brother had to call and wake him up to tell him. Nobody outside that draft room thought they were watching a franchise-altering pick happen. Fast forward less than a decade, and that same overlooked second rounder turns into a 3-time MVP, a finals MVP, and arguably the best center basketball has seen in a generation. The team around him had their own path as well. Denver had never reached the NBA Finals before this season, not once in their entire history. The closest thing this franchise had was a trip to the old ABA Finals back in the 70s, before they were even in the NBA. So when people talk about title droughts, Denver doesn't have one. They have something arguably tougher to live with. The simple reality that this level of success had never happened there, ever. Jokic's rise to this point wasn't instant either. Back in 2019, Denver took a real leap forward, but they weren't ready yet. Then in 2020, with Murray and Jokic both healthy, they made a run to the conference finals and ended up losing to the Lakers. That should have been the springboard. Instead, the wheels came off. Murray tore his ACL in 2021 and missed the entire next season. Jokic had to try to carry this team almost by himself in 2022. Year after year, it was all starting to stack up. Then finally, in 2023, with both of their stars healthy at the same time for a real playoff run, everything clicked. The patience paid off. A guy who got drafted during a fast food commercial became the centerpiece of Denver's first championship in franchise history. I'm gonna give their story a 7 out of 10.
It's good. It's good. The job is done. We can go home now.
Denver's path to the title wasn't about overwhelming everybody from the first round on. It was about getting better and better as the games mattered more. 53-29 in the regular season, the top seed out west. But it's worth noting that they weren't even the best regular season team in the league that year. Milwaukee finished 5 games ahead of them, so this was nowhere near a juggernaut of a team. What it was, though, was a team that got scary good once the playoffs hit. 16-4 across the entire postseason. They beat Minnesota in 5, then survived a real scare against Phoenix, going up 2 games to none before Phoenix won the next 2 to tie it at 2 apiece. And Denver had to fight back and close it out by winning the next 2 in 6. Then in the conference finals, they swept the Lakers, the first sweep in franchise history, with Jokic setting the record for most triple-doubles in a single postseason along the way. They closed it out against Miami in 5 games in the finals. Jokic was simply on a different planet by the time this run was over. Per game averages of 30 points, 13.5 rebounds, and basically 10 assists across the entire postseason. The kind of stat line that doesn't really have a modern comparison. He was the first one doing this consistently in the playoffs.
And the inability to control that defensive backboard. Boy, Jokic just masterful.
This is a team that figured out exactly how good they could be right when it mattered most. I'm gonna give their dominance a 7 out of 10. If you actually love basketball, watching this Nuggets team felt like watching something brand new get invented in real time. The Jokic and Murray 2-man game might have been the best 1-2 punch we've seen since Kobe and Shaq, but the comparison only goes so far. Shaq was a force of nature in the post, an unstoppable power that you simply couldn't move. Jokic was not that. Jokic was something basketball had genuinely never produced before. The first true point center the league has ever seen. A 7-footer initiating offense from the elbow, threading no-look passes through triple teams, reading the floor better than most point guards in the league. Pair that with Murray's ability to get hot in big moments and run beautiful pick and roll actions off of Jokic's gravity, and you had 2 stars creating something the sport had never shown us in this exact form. But here's the other side of it. A lot of casual fans found this title boring, and it wasn't really about the style of play, it was about the market. Denver isn't New York or LA or Boston. There's no built-in audience hyped to watch a small market win at all, and a large portion of the league simply tunes out anything that isn't a glamour franchise. Real basketball fans see it differently. Watching a small market team build something this special, with this little hype and this much patience, and finally break through. That's exactly the kind of story the league needs more of. If you actually appreciate the game, this team should have been must-watch television. I'm going to give their entertainment a 7 out of 10. At this exact moment in time, you'd have a hard time finding a single person in basketball who disliked this team or its superstar. That changed for some people down the road, but back in 2023, Jokic was as universally adored as a superstar gets. Part of that is just how numb everyone has become to his greatness. Triple-double after triple-double. Passes no center should be able to make. Stat lines that looked like they were in NBA 2K. And people just started treating it like it was normal. It wasn't normal. But that's how good Jokic was. The basketball world got so used to the impossible that it stopped looking impossible. The other part of it is just who he is as a person. After Denver actually won the title, Jokic's reaction wasn't some emotional outburst. He sat at that podium and said,
The job is done. We can go home now.
Compare that to videos of him crying tears of joy after one of his horses won a race back in Serbia, and you get a real sense of who this guy actually is. Basketball is his job. Horses are his heart. He's never tried to hide that, and it makes him impossible not to like.
No. I need to go home.
I'm sure a lot of other people have stories like this, but my fiance, who wasn't watching basketball much back then, started paying attention specifically because of Jokic. How unbothered he's seen by all the fame and success. How much more excited he got talking about his horses back home than talking about being a champion. He's not just a lovable player, he's an even more lovable person. I'm gonna give their likability a 7 out of 10. Now let's break down exactly who Denver had to get through. Round 1 was Minnesota. This looked like a tough front court matchup. Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert as a brand new 2-big experiment. In reality, Cat had missed most of the season recovering from a calf strain and wasn't fully right. Gobert was nursing back spasms and had just come off of a suspension for swinging at his own teammate. The Wolves were also missing Jaden McDaniels after he broke his hand punching a wall right before the playoffs started. Denver blew them out in game 1 by 29 and closed the series out in just 5 games. Round 2 was Phoenix. This was the real test of the run. Devin Booker and Kevin Durant were terrifying, and Denver actually jumped out to a 2-0 lead before Phoenix tied it up at 2 apiece. But right as the series leveled out, Chris Paul went down with a groin injury in Game 2 and missed the rest of the series entirely. And DeAndre Ayton also missed the closeout game with a rib injury. Denver pulled away and closed it out in 6 games. Conference Finals, the Lakers, LeBron James and Anthony Davis, a real Western Conference heavyweight. But Denver didn't just beat them, they swept them. The first sweep in franchise history, with Jokic setting the all-time record for most triple-doubles in a single postseason in the process.
Jokic has to put it up. Falling away, puts it up. Bang! Nikola Jokic knocks it down.
Then the finals, the 8th seed, somehow making a miracle run all the way to the championship behind Jimmy Butler's heroics.
Butler! Long shot! Good!
A great story for the Heat, but a massive talent gap on paper. Denver closed it out in 5. There's something worth pointing out about this entire run as a whole. Almost every single opponent Denver faced ended up looking genuinely bad by the time the series wrapped up. Not just beaten, but exposed. So here's the breakdown. Every single opponent Denver faced had a real claim to danger. 2 former MVPs and a stacked Wolves front court. A top-tier Suns duo, the Lakers, and a scrappy Heat team that had already upset 2 better seeds to get there. But injuries gutted Minnesota and Phoenix specifically in their biggest moments. And that's exactly why this path is more nuanced than people give it credit for. Denver was clearly the best team in the league, but health broke their way more than once. And even when their opponent were healthy, Denver still made them look smaller than they actually were. I'm gonna give the strength of their opponents a 5 out of 10. And there we have the 2023 Denver Nuggets, totaling at 33 out of 50.
Thank you, though. You know that I told that I don't want to stay on parade, but I want to stay on parade. This is the best.
Next up, we're heading back to 2022, and this Warriors team had a completely different kind of story to tell. Let's talk about how the 2022 Warriors had something to prove that went way beyond just winning another title. Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and Andre Iguodala, the old core, finally getting back to the top after years of adversity tore this dynasty apart. Klay Thompson missing 2 full seasons with a torn ACL and then a torn Achilles. Kevin Durant went to Brooklyn. 2 straight years of missing the playoffs entirely. This was not the unstoppable force from a few years earlier. This was a team that had to prove it could win without the guy who left. They went 53-29 in the regular season, the 3rd seed in the West, then went on a run that ended with their 4th championship in 8 years. This story actually starts years before the season even began, with one of the most controversial decisions in finals history. Back in 2015, Steph Curry won his first championship, the regular season MVP, the engine of the whole team, and the finals MVP trophy went to Andre Iguodala instead of Curry being credited for limiting LeBron James, right? Curry got 0 votes. And to this day, that's still considered one of the most debated snubs in NBA history. And it became the first crack in this supposed idea that Curry was not the best player in his own team, which is absolutely ridiculous. Then Kevin Durant arrived in the summer of 2016, and the cracks turned into something bigger. Durant won back-to-back finals MVPs in 2017 and 2018. And almost overnight, the conversation shifted entirely away from Curry. For Warriors haters and even some neutral fans, it became the easy argument. 3 championships and somehow no finals MVP to his name. The tension inside that locker room eventually boiled over. In 2018, Draymond Green and Kevin Durant got into a heated blow-up after a regular season loss to the Clippers. And Green reportedly told Durant something that would define everything that came next. He said, "We don't need you. We won without you. Leave." And well, Durant ended up leaving for Brooklyn that following summer. So in 2022, when the same old core got back to the mountaintop without Durant on the roster, it was much more than just a championship. It was an answer. Curry finally won his finals MVP, the one piece of hardware that had eluded him for 7 years. And Draymond's words from that locker room blow up got backed up in the most public way possible. They didn't need him. They won without him. I'm gonna give their story an 8 out of 10.
What are they gonna say now? What are they gonna say now?
The Warriors title actually started with a scare because their own superstar wasn't even fully healthy heading into the playoffs. Late in the regular season, Marcus Smart dove for a loose ball and landed directly on Steph Curry's foot, causing a sprained ligament that knocked Curry out for the final 12 games of the season. He came back for the playoffs, but he wasn't right away back to being a starter, coming off of the bench for 4 of the 5 games in the first round just to manage his workload. And even with that, Golden State still rolled. 53-29 in the regular season. 3rd seed in the West. 16-6 across the entire postseason. They got past Denver and an MVP-level Jokic in 5 games. They knocked out the 2nd-seeded Grizzlies in 6. They got past Dallas in 5 to reach the finals. Then in the finals themselves, they fell behind 2-1 against Boston before ripping off 3 straight games to close it out in 6.
Wiggins drives and finishes! Exclamation point from Andrew Wiggins!
Klay Thompson's resurgence was a massive part in this. 2 years removed from a torn ACL and then a torn Achilles. The same guy who once looked finished was knocking down big shots again like nothing ever happened. Curry himself averaged over 31 points a game in the finals and finally got that elusive finals MVP. Now I know this wasn't the most dominant run we've covered in this video, but it is a title that came together despite real injury concerns to their best player heading in. And that's worth respecting. I'm gonna give their dominance a 6 out of 10. This Warriors team was a treat to watch, and it's easy to see why. You've got Curry and Klay, two of the greatest shooters the game has ever seen, doing what they do best. But what actually made this team special wasn't just the stars. It was the role players who showed up exactly when they needed them most. Jordan Poole was incredible.
Poole with the ball. Launches.
He truly provided relief when Steph needed some rest. But Andrew Wiggins is my favorite example. The #1 overall pick back in 2014. A guy who had spent years in Minnesota getting written off as a disappointment, a bust, a player who never lived up to the hype. By the time he got to Golden State, a lot of people had simply moved on from him. And then in the finals, he played the best basketball of his entire career, locking up Jason Tatum defensively, crashing the glass, hitting big shots, and walking away with his first ever championship. It's one of the best redemption arcs in this entire video. And then I gotta shout out one of the biggest unsung heroes of this team that nobody talks about, Otto Porter Jr. He was a guy that only played 3 games with the Magic before this season, completely off of everybody's radar. Golden State brought him in, and after coming off of the bench through the first 3 games of the finals, Steve Kerr moved him into the starting lineup for games 4 through 6, where he knocked down big threes and played within himself exactly when the team needed it. This was a team most of the league actually wanted to see. After everything the old core had been through, the injuries, the missed playoffs, the doubt, a lot of neutral fans were rooting for this version of the Warriors to get back on top. I'm gonna give their entertainment an 8 out of 10. For the most part, this is one of the easiest teams in this entire video to root for. Curry doesn't really have haters, at least not real ones. He's universally respected, likable, the kind of superstar who's never been in any controversy in his entire career. Klay Thompson is right there with him, especially after everything he battled through just to get back on the floor. And at this point in his career, Steve Kerr was still viewed as one of the smartest, most likable coaches in the league. Charming in interviews, beloved by his players, the perfect voice for this group. But then there's Draymond Green, the heart and soul of this team, and also the one guy who makes this whole likability conversation complicated. Draymond's never been shy about saying exactly what's on his mind, on the court or off of it. He's been at the center of real controversy over the years, getting suspended for hitting teammates, getting into it with opponents, talking trash constantly. A lot of neutral fans can't stand him, and it's not hard to understand why. He's loud, he's combative, and he's never once tried to soften that image to be more likable, which honestly, I applaud him for. So here's the thing, even people who hate Draymond can't fully hate this team because of the guys around him. It's hard not to respect what this group was actually proving with this championship. I'm gonna give their likability a 7 out of 10. Now let's break down exactly who Golden State had to get through, because this path had some real talent, even if injuries reshaped a couple of these series. Round 1 was Denver, and on paper, a team led by reigning MVP Nikola Jokic should be terrifying. In reality, Denver was missing both Jamal Murray, still recovering from a torn ACL, and Michael Porter Jr., who was out with a back injury. It was essentially Jokic trying to do everything by himself against a full roster. Golden State 1 and 5.
And Curry. Oh, Stephen Curry with a little magic.
Round 2 is Memphis, and this one got messy. Memphis's Dillon Brooks was suspended after a flagrant foul that fractured Gary Payton II's elbow. Then in game 3, the Warriors' own Jordan Poole grabbed Ja Morant's knee chasing a loose ball, an injury that knocked Memphis' best player out for the rest of the series. Memphis actually fought hard without him, even blowing Golden State out in game 5. But Golden State ended up closing it out in 6. Conference Finals was Dallas. Luka Doncic was brilliant individually, fresh off eliminating the top-seeded Suns in a stunning upset. But this Mavericks roster simply didn't have enough talent around him to match Golden State's depth. The Warriors got the job done in 5. Then the finals against the Celtics. They were a legitimately complete team, with Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and a defense that finished the regular season as the league's best. Golden State fell behind 2 games to 1 before winning 3 straight to close it out in 6. And in my opinion, part of that collapse falls on head coach Ime Udoka. I felt like Boston never made the in-series adjustments they needed once Golden State started to make changes of their own. And that stubbornness cost them a real shot at the title. So here's the breakdown. Denver and Memphis both looked like real threats, especially the MVP in Denver. But both series got reshaped by major injuries to the other team's best player. Dallas was mostly a one-man show that ran into the deeper roster. Boston was the one true healthy opponent Golden State faced all postseason. And that's the series where the Warriors actually had to earn it the hard way. So with that, I'm going to give the strength of their opponents a 5 out of 10. A lot of injuries in the 2020s. And there we have the 2022 Golden State Warriors, totaling at 34 out of 50.
Ever. He's an NBA Finals MVP. The 2022 Bill Russell NBA Finals MVP award goes to Stephen Curry.
Next up, we're heading to 2021. Now let's head to Milwaukee. And don't forget, this is a team that almost lost its superstar before this whole run ever even happened. Heading into the 2021 offseason, Giannis Antetokounmpo was a free agent flight risk, a two-time MVP, the best player on the team. And there was a genuine fear around the league that he might walk away from Milwaukee entirely if the front office didn't show him that they were serious about building a real contender. So, Milwaukee went all in. They traded away their starting point guard Eric Bledsoe, veteran George Hill, and a package of future picks to bring in Drew Holiday, a tough defensive-minded guard from New Orleans who never actually won a title himself, but had a reputation as exactly the kind of player you build a contender around. Around the same time, they locked up Chris Middleton, who had been Giannis' steady second star. And of course, Brook Lopez, a stretch big who could space the floor and still protect the rim on the other end. Shortly after, Giannis ended up signing that Supermax extension, betting his prime years on this exact roster. This whole season played out under a cloud nobody could ignore. That one sickness, if you guys remember, had shrunk the schedule down to 72 games instead of the usual 82. And for most of the year, arenas were either empty or running at a fraction of their normal capacity. This wasn't a normal title chase. It was basketball played through an extremely awkward environment for most of the year. They ended up finishing 46-26. Third seed in the East. Not the most dominant record in the conference, but this team had something that most others didn't. Real continuity, real defensive identity, and a superstar who just put his future on the line to stay and finish what they started. This is a story about pressure, about a kid nobody believed in, and about a franchise that had been waiting an entire lifetime to feel this feeling again. Start with Giannis himself. Growing up in Athens, the son of Nigerian immigrants, his family didn't have a steady income. So as a kid, he sold sunglasses and watches on the street just so they could afford food and rent some nights. Nobody in that situation projects to become anything close to an NBA superstar. By 2021, he was already climbing towards the top of nearly every meaningful stat in Milwaukee Bucks franchise history. But greatness alone doesn't erase pressure. And the pressure on Giannis headed into the season was enormous. The Bucks hadn't won a title since 1971, back when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Oscar Robertson were running the show. 50 years of nothing. Does that sound familiar? And after years of playoff disappointments, including a brutal second-round exit to Miami the year before, a lot of people around the league had started writing Milwaukee off entirely, wondering if Giannis would ever get this team over the hump, or if he'd eventually leave to chase the title somewhere else. Then there's Chris Middleton, the second star of this whole story. They only played him for 27 games as a rookie, and then shipped him out the very next summer as a throw-in piece for a Brandon Jennings trade. The team that drafted him had basically given up on him before he ever got a real chance. And over the years, he turned into exactly the steady two-way second option a championship needs next to a superstar. So when this team finally broke through in 2021, it wasn't just ending a 50-year drought for the franchise. It was Giannis silencing every doubt about him whether he could finish the job or not. And it was Chris Middleton proving the team that gave up on him that they got it completely wrong. I'm going to give their story a solid 9 out of 10. This is one of the most physically and emotionally demanding championship runs we'll cover in this video, and the numbers alone don't capture how close it came to falling apart at a single turn. They went 16-7 in the playoffs. They swept Miami in round 1, then ran into a Brooklyn team with Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. It went the full 7 games, and Game 7 is one of the most insane games in NBA playoff history. With Brooklyn down 2 and just 1 second left, Durant hit what looked like a series-winning 3, except his foot was on the line. The shot tied the game instead of ending Milwaukee's season, and the Bucks won it in overtime on a go-ahead shot from none other than Chris Middleton. Then came the East Finals against Atlanta, and that's where things got terrifying. In Game 4, with the series tied 2 apiece, Giannis hyperextended his knee badly. The initial fear around the league was a torn ACL or MCL, the kind of injury that ends a season and threatens a career. He missed the rest of that series entirely. And here's the part that says everything about this team's depth. In Game 5, with Giannis on the bench, Brook Lopez dropped a playoff career-high 33 points, and Bobby Portis, starting in Giannis's place, added a playoff career-high 22. Then in the closeout Game 6, Middleton and Holiday simply took over, combining for over 50 points to finish off the Hawks without their two-time MVP playing a single minute. Then in the finals against Phoenix, Milwaukee dropped the first 2 games, putting them in an 0-2 hole against Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and a Suns team playing with total control. Nobody knew if Giannis would even play in Game 1, let alone the rest of the series. He suited up anyway, refused to wear the protective knee brace doctors wanted him in, and Milwaukee ended up winning Game 3. Then in Game 4, with a series on the line, Middleton took over again, dropping a career playoff high 40 points to even the series at 2 apiece, setting up Giannis's now legendary chase down block on DeAndre Ayton to seal the win.
Throws it up for Ayton. Shot blocked by Antetokounmpo. What a block from Giannis.
From that point on, Milwaukee didn't lose again, capped by 50 points, 14 rebounds, and 5 blocks in the clincher. The first 50-point finals performance with double-digit rebounds and multiple blocks in NBA history.
Giannis Antetokounmpo with one of the most iconic performances in the storied history of the NBA Finals.
This was a Game 7 saved by a single inch of shoe leather, a superstar playing through a very, very serious injury, and a supporting cast deep enough to close out a series without him. All of it stacked together to finally end a 50-year drought. I'm gonna give their dominance a 6 out of 10.
I trusted this team. I wanted to do it here in the city. I wanted to do it with these guys, so I'm happy. I'm happy that we were able to get it done.
There's something thrilling about watching this team play, and it starts with Giannis treating the basket like it owes him money. Every single possession felt like a freight train picking up speed, and once he got rolling, nobody on the floor was going to stop him. The chase down blocks became a signature moment of his entire career throughout this run. The A&M block in the finals being the most obvious crown jewel, but it wasn't a one-time thing. He was doing it all postseason. Then you've got Chris Middleton, the most reliable closer on the roster, the guy who could be quiet for 3 quarters and then completely take over a game when it mattered most. Drew Holiday also brought relentless perimeter defense and just enough shot making to keep defenses honest. Brook Lopez anchored the paint defensively while still spacing the floor on the other end. We've talked about it before with the Thunder, but most casual fans don't get all that excited about defense. They want shot making. They want highlight plays. They want somebody cooking on every other possession. This team could do that when it mattered. Middleton and Giannis both proved that in the finals, but at its core, this was a team that hung its hat on defensive identity first. That's not always the most exciting style for the average viewer, but for anybody who actually appreciates the chess match of playoff basketball, this team was a treat. I'm gonna give their entertainment a 6 out of 10. Everybody and their mothers love this team, and it's honestly hard to find a single player on this roster who didn't deserve to be standing there holding that trophy. Take Brook Lopez, for example. He came into the league as a traditional back-to-the-basket center with the Nets, barely ever shooting a 3 for his first 8 seasons. Then he got to Milwaukee and completely reinvented himself, turning into one of the best stretch 5s the league has ever seen, earning that nickname Splash Mountain along the way, partially because him and his brother own a house in Disney World, right? Look that up, it's pretty cool. That is not a small adjustment. That's a player remaking his entire game in his 30s just to fit what his team needed. Then there's Drew Holiday, proof that a defensive-minded guard who can also step out and knock down shots isn't just valuable, he's vital. Every contender in this league wants a guy like that, and Milwaukee actually had one. And of course, Chris Middleton is the blueprint for why every championship team needs that number 2 guy. Somebody who can take possessions off the superstar's plate, who can close out a finals game when the lights are the brightest, and who never once complained about playing second fiddle to Giannis. Instead, he embraced it. Depth matters, continuity matters, and when you put it all together around a superstar who'd already won the entire league over with a story, you get a team that almost nobody outside a rival fan base could find a reason to root against. Now, I'll be honest with you. I claimed the Bucks to be my secondary team in the East the moment they drafted Giannis. Watching this group win it all in 2021 made me prouder than it probably should have, especially considering they're not even my number 1 team. Now, if only my Pistons could find Cade a real number 2. I'm gonna give their likability an 8 out of 10. Now let's break down exactly who Milwaukee had to get through. Round 1 was Miami, and this one was pure revenge. The Heat had bounced Milwaukee out of the playoffs the year before in the bubble, and this time the Bucks made sure there'd be no rematch drama. Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo were both healthy and at full strength, but Milwaukee swept them anyway, never trailing in the series and blowing them out twice by 29 or more points. Sometimes the opponent isn't banged up, they're just outclassed. Round 2, you had Brooklyn. And this is the scariest team Milwaukee saw all postseason. Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. An absolute super team built specifically to win it all that year. But the series never got to show off that full trio. Harden battled a hamstring injury that limited him for most of the series, and Irving went down with an ankle injury that knocked him out entirely for a stretch. Even shorthanded, Durant was nearly unstoppable, dropping 48 points in the final game, the most ever scored in a Game 7. His potential series-winning 3 at the buzzer got ruled a 2 because of his shoe size. The conference finals was Atlanta. The Hawks were a surprise team, a 5th seed that had fired their coach mid-season. Trae Young, who was their best player, missed 2 full games in the series with a foot bone bruise after stepping on an official's foot. Even without their full firepower, Atlanta still pushed the series to 6 games. And it's the series where Giannis went down with a hyperextended knee that nearly ended his season. Then the finals. Phoenix, Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and a Suns team that was hungry. Both stars were fully healthy for the series, and Phoenix jumped out to a 2-0 lead that looked every bit like a team that was ready to win it all. Milwaukee had to claw all the way back from that hole against a healthy, complete opponent to finally close it out in 6. So let's break it down. Miami and Phoenix were both fully healthy. Brooklyn and Atlanta had real injuries to their key players, but even shorthanded, both of those series still went to the brink. A Game 7 thriller and a 6-game fight that nearly cost Milwaukee its best player for good. This was a path that tested Milwaukee in every possible way. Healthy opponents, banged up opponents, and their own body breaking down right in the middle of it. I'm gonna give the strength of their opponents a 6 out of 10. And there we have the 2021 Milwaukee Bucks, totaling at 35 out of 50.
We did it! We did it, man! We're here, my God, man! Oh, love you, my God. Love you, man. I love you. My God.
Now let's head all the way back to 2020, the craziest season this league has ever seen, because this is the year the NBA got locked inside of a bubble. This team is impossible to talk about without talking about the year itself, because nothing about the 2020 Lakers can be separated from the chaos surrounding them. It started with a blockbuster trade in the summer of 2019. The Lakers sent Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, and a pile of future first-round picks to New Orleans for Anthony Davis, pairing him with LeBron James to build an instant title contender. Around the two stars, the front office added a full roster of proven vets: Rajon Rondo, Danny Green, Avery Bradley, Dwight Howard, and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, all brought in to support the two best players on the floor. They went 52-19, the best record in the Western Conference, under first-year head coach Frank Vogel. On paper, this looked like a clean super team story, but this season was anything but normal. This season carries more weight than any other team we've covered, and the reason for that has nothing to do with basketball at all. In January of 2020, Kobe Bryant tragically passed away in an accident that also claimed his daughter Gianna and 7 other people. For Laker fans, for the city of Los Angeles, for basketball as a whole, it was a gut punch nobody saw coming. LeBron James had just passed Kobe on the all-time scoring list the night before. The Lakers didn't take the court again for 5 days, and when they finally did, the entire arena turned into a tribute. And from that point on, this team carried Kobe's memory with them everywhere they went. And then everything else happened. The league shut down for months. And when it finally came back, the NBA built an actual bubble in Orlando, sealing every team inside one location for months at a time, away from families, away from any sense of the normal life. Players who lived through it have called it one of the hardest stretches of their careers. No home crowd, no travel, nothing but the same hallways for months straight. Some fans still try to throw an asterisk on this title because of the bubble, and I don't really buy that. There's no such thing as a fake ring, especially when every single team in that bubble dealt with the same exact conditions. If anything, this might be the purest version of basketball we've ever seen. No home court advantage, no outside noise, just whoever was built to survive the actual grind. So when the Lakers finally won it that October, it was a tribute carried by the guy who had taken Kobe's place on that scoring list days before everything changed. Finished inside the strangest environment this league has ever asked anyone to play in. I'm gonna give their story an 8 out of 10. This team's dominance is tangled up with a question nobody can fully answer. Would they have even won this title if the season had gone on normally? LeBron and Anthony Davis were the engine, but heading into that shutdown, there were real signs that LeBron specifically was starting to wear down. The kind of grind that builds up over an 82-game season for a guy already well into his 30s. Then the league paused for months. When play resumed in the bubble, the Lakers came back as fresh as either of those two stars had looked in years. There were no back-to-backs across multiple cities. No travel at all. Just basketball in a controlled environment with built-in rest between games.
LeBron off the ball! LeBron! Say it with your chest!
The playoff numbers back this up. 16-5 across the entire postseason. They beat Portland in 5, Houston in 5, handled Denver in 5, and closed out Miami in 6 in the NBA Finals. LeBron averaged basically 30 points, 12 rebounds, and 8.5 assists in the finals alone, winning his 4th career Finals MVP and becoming the first player to ever win that award with 3 different franchises. Now I know there's real debate about how much credit this run deserves because of that extended rest. Some executives around the league have been quoted saying privately that this title doesn't carry the same weight as others, but the players who actually lived through it tell a completely different story, describing the bubble as one of the most mentally taxing environments they've ever competed in, regardless of how fresh their legs felt walking in. I'm gonna give their dominance a 7 out of 10. This team was built around the idea that Anthony Davis would be the focal point on offense, with LeBron orchestrating everything around him. And for stretches of this run, that's exactly how it played out. But the deeper this team got into the playoffs, especially once the finals arrived, LeBron just couldn't stay in the background. He turned back the clock the way he's done his entire career, taking over fourth quarters, controlling the pace, and reminding everybody exactly why he's still considered one of the best players alive even at that stage of his career. He capped it off with a near triple-double in the closeout game and walked away with his 4th Finals MVP. But Davis finally got to show the league what he could really do on a winning stage. After years in New Orleans on teams that never got anywhere close to this, watching him smile, celebrate, and dominate the way everybody always knew he was capable of, that was its own kind of fun to watch. This was a guy validating his entire career in real time. And then the role players turned this into a showcase as well. KCP had already been written off by a large portion of this fan base earlier in that season. Some people even wanted him traded. And then in Game 4 of the NBA Finals, he came up with clutch corner threes and lockdown defense on Duncan Robinson, Jimmy Butler, whoever. Rajon Rondo, a guy a lot of people thought was washed at that point in his career, dropped 19 points on 8 of 11 shooting in that closeout game, blowing right past to gas Jimmy Butler like it was nothing. Watching a veteran like that find one more big moment in him was a treat. But there's a real piece of entertainment missing from this run, and it's worth being honest about. So much of what makes playoff basketball special is the crowd, the atmosphere. You know what I'm talking about.
Rose trying to get open, fires away. Bang! It's over! The Bulls win at the buzzer!
The energy of a building shaken after a big shot, the home court intimidation, the noise that swings momentum. None of that existed here. These arenas were completely empty, with nothing but fan faces beamed in on the screens around the court. As cool as the moments themselves were, that missing piece sucked away a real layer of excitement that every other team in this video got to play with. I'm gonna give their entertainment a 7 out of 10.
Davis for three. Bang! Anthony Davis from downtown. And the Lakers take a 9-point lead.
This one splits pretty clean down the middle depending on who you ask. LeBron, as we all know, comes with a built-in army of haters. And most of it traces back to one thing: Michael Jordan fans who will never accept anybody challenging that throne. But let's not get this twisted, because LeBron stans are a completely different breed. For every person who hates the guy, there's at least an equal number or more who absolutely adore him. I'm talking about love him. People have written songs about him. People have quite literally shouted the guy out at their graduation speech.
I'd like to thank LeBron James just because.
LeBron fans show up in a way that most fan bases simply don't, and that loyalty isn't going anywhere, championship or not. Then there's Anthony Davis, and his situation is a little more complicated. He requested a trade out of New Orleans back in 2019. And to this day, Pelicans fans still boo him every time he's back in that building. Davis himself has called himself a villain to that fan base. I get that bitterness from their side, but real basketball fans know what was actually going on in New Orleans. That front office wasted years of his prime on rosters that never got out of the first round more than once. Wanting out of a situation like that is not betrayal. Outside of those two specific storylines and the ongoing crowd of people who refuse to call us a real championship because of the bubble, this title was genuinely fun for most basketball fans. You had a star-stacked, deep Lakers roster against a scrappy, undermanned Miami team that had already fought through injuries just to get to the finals. That kind of contrast, the favorite versus the underdog, is exactly the matchup that most neutral fans love watching. I'm gonna give their likability a 7 out of 10. Now let's break down who the Lakers had to get through, because this path is full of opponents who either ran out of stars or simply ran out of gas. Round 1 was Portland. The Trailblazers actually stole game 1 behind 34 points from Damian Lillard, and that win meant something. This wasn't a pushover 8 seed. Lillard was even playing through a dislocated finger from game 2. The Lakers answered by winning the next 2 to take a 2-1 series lead. Then in game 4, with Los Angeles cruising to a 29-point blowout, Lillard went down with a knee injury that ended his night and effectively his season, putting Portland in a near impossible 3-1 hole. Round 2 was Houston. Russell Westbrook came into the series still working through a quad injury that had bothered him for weeks. And Houston had already committed to a small ball lineup with literally nobody taller than 6'8" on the floor. James Harden and Westbrook combining for 60 points. And I think it's worth to mention that role player Daniel House was also kicked out of the bubble entirely partway through the series for having an unauthorized guest in his room. But I mean, he was a complimentary piece at best. Not the reason the series swung. The real story was the size mismatch.
A little hot. Westbrook on LeBron. LeBron ate it up at the rim.
The Lakers took the next 4 straight to close it out in 5. Conference Finals was Denver. This is the one team in the whole bubble that was fully healthy facing the Lakers. Jokic, Murray, and Michael Porter Jr. are all available and playing. But Denver had already survived back-to-back 7-game series just to get to this round, clawing back from 3-1 deficits twice along the way. By the time they faced Los Angeles, they simply didn't have anything left in the tank. The Lakers won it in 5. Then the finals against Miami, the scrappiest and most banged up team of the whole run. Bam Adebayo and Goran Dragic were both out with injuries for stretches of the series. And Jimmy Butler had to play through everything himself, dropping a 40-point triple-double in Game 3 just to keep their season alive. The Lakers eventually closed it out in 6. Portland series had Dame getting hurt, but the series was pretty much over already. Houston was a straightforward size mismatch that no amount of small ball creativity could solve. Denver was healthy, but completely drained from back-to-back marathons, and Miami fought as hard as any shorthanded team could possibly fight. They didn't have the most difficult path to a championship, but it also wasn't the easiest in this era either, especially because of the bubble situation, depending how you look at it. I'm gonna give the strength of their opponents a 5 out of 10. And there we have the 2020 Los Angeles Lakers, totaling at 34 out of 50.
It's tough. It's tough on the body. It's a lot of hard work, but these guys push me every day, especially Bron and Doe. They always on me about being great, being better.
So there it is, 7 champions. 7 completely different stories. And after going through dominance, story, entertainment, likability, and strength of their opponents for every single one of them, we've got our answer. Let's count it down starting from the bottom. In 7th place, with 29 points, the 2025 Oklahoma City Thunder. A historically dominant regular season, but an officiating controversy and a title some will always say came down to one cruel injury for somebody else. In 6th, the 2024 Boston Celtics with 31. By far the best team in the league that year, but an easy path through the East and a roster full of personalities that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way kept them from climbing any higher. In fifth, the 2023 Denver Nuggets with 33, a franchise's first ever championship, carried by maybe the most unlikely superstar this league has ever produced. Tied for third, we've got two teams separated by nothing at 34 points each. The 2020 Los Angeles Lakers, a championship built entirely around honoring Kobe Bryant inside the strangest environment this league has ever asked anyone to compete in. And right there with them, the 2022 Golden State Warriors, the redemption story for an entire era, proving they never needed Kevin Durant to get back on top. In second place with 35 points, we have the 2021 Milwaukee Bucks. 50 years of nothing, ended by a superstar who played through an injury that nearly cost him his entire career, all backed by a supporting cast deep enough to close out a series without him. And that brings us to number one, the team we started this whole video with, the team that just brought a championship back to a city that had been waiting 53 years to feel this again. With 36 points, the best champion of the 2020s is none other than the 2026 New York Knicks. They had an absolutely historic playoff run, a story over half a century in the making, and a fan base that finally gets to call themselves champions.
It's over! It's over! Knick fans, this is not a dream!
So that's it. That's the ranking. And look, I told you at the start of this video that the answer might not be who you expected. And maybe for some of you, it wasn't. But every single one of these teams earned their place on this list. And every single one of them deserves their moment in basketball history. Let me know in the comment section down below if you agree or disagree with my ranking. And if you enjoyed this video format, let me know, because if this video does well, we're gonna do an entire 2010s next. So please drop a like and be sure to subscribe, because this one took a long time to complete. Be sure to check out the videos that are on the screen right now. I'm sure you'll love them. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.